Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm It's Robbie Rhino, and in today's video I have 3 gameplays and a tank review / guide of the FV214 Conqueror MK. So this is a British Era 2 heavy tank for the Western Alliance in the Cold War game mode. It's a middle Era 2 tank. It comes after the Centurion 9, which is a medium tank, so it's been a while since I've delved into this line, but I've got it fully upgraded and had a few sessions, and I feel ready to give my opinion on this tank. And it leads on to the Chieftain MK, which is the last British heavy tank you'll get in Era 2 before you move on to Era 3. So in today's video, I'll run down the stats of the Conqueror MK compared to 2 other tanks that I feel are good competitors to this tank to show you how this thing holds up. We'll talk about the armor profile, my equipment and commander setup, and how that affects the raw stats of this vehicle, and then we'll jump into the 3 gameplays to show you how I like to play this tank and how I try and get the most out of it. So over here on Excel, I've got the stats of the Conqueror MK here on the left. In the middle, I've got the stats of the T72AV, which is arguably the best Era 2 heavy tank. It's an Eastern Alliance heavy tank, and it's very powerful indeed. 125mm gun, and it has an 80GM option as a third ammunition option on its upgraded gun package, so definitely one to watch out for. And here on the right, I've got the stats of the infamous FV214. Pretty much OP, ridiculous armor, and yeah, played a lot by many different people to grind that silver, so it's a very good comparison to the Conqueror MK to see how this thing holds up against the OP heavy tank in Era 2. So green is the best stat, red is the worst, orange is somewhere in between, and yellow is highlighted. That's the base stats updated with my equipment and commander setup, and I'll talk you through that in just a little bit. So we'll go through the stats of the Conqueror MK, talk about the comparison, and then we'll talk a little bit about the armor and my equipment and commander setup. So to start with then, hit points wise, the Conqueror MK has 2,950, which is the same as the T72AV, so plenty of HP to take quite a few shots. You don't have the armor of the other 2 tanks in this comparison, but you still can take a few shots and get stuck in, and you're playing a kind of mid-range support tank. That's how I like to play it best. So you're always going to try and avoid getting shot at where possible, and it doesn't have armor to rely on even on the turret, so definitely watch out for that. But the best in this comparison is the FV214, 3,000 hit points, but only 50 more. It's got the best view range, the Conqueror MK at 470 meters, the same as the FV214, 20 meters better than the T72AV, meaning it's more capable to spot for itself. That will be boosted up with my equipment and commander setup, but not by a long way, because I focus on DPM and getting the most out of this gun, because that is the best attribute this tank has. And now we move on to the mobility of the Conqueror MK, and it's kind of a mixed bag. It has the best engine power, but because it's such a big, large, chunky boy, very heavy tank indeed, the power to weight ratio is pretty poor at 14.56. It has the worst, in this comparison, top forward speed at 48.2 kilometers an hour, which is very frustrating indeed, but it does have the best in this comparison reverse speed at 24.1 kilometers an hour in reverse. Very nice for getting off of those ridge lines. It's got a hull traverse of 34 degrees a second and a turret traverse of 38 degrees a second. So unfortunately, it's not quite as fast as the T72AV, which is very nimble indeed with a 60.3 kilometers an hour top speed, but it does have a slightly better power to weight than the FV214, and if you've played that or come up against them, you know how sluggish that tank is. Very similar top forward speed, but it does have better reverse speed to get off of those ridge lines. In terms of your hull traverse, it's the same as the FV214, so you're going to get a picture of how this thing handles. Very nimble T72AV, definitely outshines the Conqueror MK and the FV214. However, your turret traverse isn't too bad, and that will go up with gun handling perks. It's 38 degrees a second, which is not quite as good as the FV214, but it is better than the T72AV. So when you are in place, you are relatively nimble at getting your armor and your gun around to targets that are trying to get around you. It just takes a while to get into position, a little bit sluggish, but it's nice to have that best in class reverse speed at 24.1 kilometers an hour in reverse. So now we're going to get on to the gun then, and the Conqueror Mark 1 has a 120mm gun, the same as on the FV214, whereas the T72AV, like I said, arguably the best Era 2 heavy tank, or Tech Tree heavy tank I should say without being a premium, has a 125mm gun, so a slightly larger caliber, which means it does have larger alpha damage. But the Conqueror Mark 1 fires APDS as standard and its premium option, and it has a HESH option, and these HESH rounds are very nice for firing at lightly armoured targets. The damage on the standard and premium rounds is 400, and on the HESH rounds is 515 on this 120mm gun. The speed on the standard rounds is pretty nice at 1456 meters a second, and it does go up by a little bit to 1491 meters a second on the premium APDS, and it's about half as good on the HESH rounds, which is to be expected, so give double the lead basically, 778 meters a second. Your standard penetration is pretty reasonable at 408 millimeters. Your APDS, your premium APDS does suffer however at 452 millimeters, and your HESH rounds are very nice at 260 millimeters. You can use them on quite a few different tanks, the rear and sides of lightly armoured tanks with no spaced armour, and light tanks themselves. It can come in handy when they're trying to circle you and that kind of thing. So in terms of the comparison then, how does this gun hold up to the other two in this comparison? Well, in terms of the penetration on the standard rounds, as you can see, it does have the joint best with the T72AV, much better than the FV214. However, on the premium rounds, you can see that the T72 does have the best in class. However, these are heat rounds. They won't lose penetration over distance, but they won't penetrate composite and spaced armor very well at all, and they will likely get absorbed. They're very hard to use, so I'd much rather have the APDS or the APF SDS that the FV214 has. But 452mm, although it's not as good as the T72AV and the FV214, you can start to combat the FV214's hull with this kind of penetration, especially if you're shooting down on it. So it's not too bad, and it's definitely good enough for the grind to get to the Chieftain Mark 5. And you do have those lovely HESH rounds that you can use. Of course, it's not quite as good as the HESH rounds on the FV214, because why wouldn't they give the OP tank the best HESH rounds, 30mm less, but it's more than enough to use in different situations. Unfortunately, it's the lowest alpha damage for all three ammunition choices in this comparison. As you can see, the T72AV has ridiculous penetration and damage on its ATGM option, but it does have terrible speed. So overall, it isn't too bad. When we get onto the gun handling and DPM, you'll see why this gun works out pretty well as a support tank. But standard penetration, nice for those that don't want to fire premium rounds. Shell velocity is more than adequate on all of the rounds. Best shell velocity on the HESH rounds. And yeah, you're just going to suffer in comparison to something like the FV214 or something like the T72AV or quite a lot of the other tanks in Era 2 that have better penetration. But it's more than enough to make work. And then we got onto the gun handling then. So with the Conqueror Mark 1, you have 1.9 seconds aim time. You have a 0.3 accuracy, a base DPM of 3,528, which means that I reload, or you reload base for 6.8 seconds, and I now reload for 5.09 seconds. You have 50 rounds of ammunition, 10 degrees of gun depression, and 15 degrees of gun elevation. So in terms of the comparison, the FV214, of course they've given the OP tank the best aim time. However, the Conqueror does pip the T72AV by just a little bit, and the Conqueror Mark 1 has the best accuracy in this comparison, better than the T72AV and much better than the FV214. So this is a very good sniping support tank indeed. It also has the best DPM in this comparison, only by a little bit over the FV214, but by some way over the T72AV. So you want to make use of this DPM, and with that lower alpha damage, or the lowest in this comparison, you're going to want to try and get as many shots in as possible to rack up that damage. In terms of the gun depression then, best in this comparison, it beats the FV214 and it's much more flexible on a ridgeline than the T72 AV. It doesn't have great gun elevation at 15 degrees, slightly better than the T72 AV, but the FV214 again has a better stat at 20 degrees of gun elevation. But the take home from this is fantastic accuracy, which you can get down to pinpoint accuracy levels, great DPM, fantastic aim time. Gun depression is more than enough to use on many different ridgelines in the game. You've got enough mobility to get around to where you need to be, albeit a little bit sluggishly, so you have to think about where you're going. But all in all, it's not too bad of a grind. Don't expect too much, and yeah, you won't be disappointed when that happens. So in terms of my equipment and commander setup then, in terms of my equipment, I run improved ventilation, advanced loader, and gun stabilizer. And on my commander I run 6th Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Snapshot, Run and Gun, Armour Angling, and Track Mechanic. So in terms of my commander, I'm running gun handling skills because I want to boost up what's good about this tank already. Armour Angling, as the armour isn't that reliable, you'll be taking damage. I want to be able to reduce the amount of damage I'm taking, and Track Mechanic to keep my tracks in place because it's actually quite a good side scraper, and that's something I can show you in the garage when we talk about the armour of this vehicle, and Rapid Loading to help the DPM. And in terms of my equipment, I'm running that loader to help the DPM, the vents to help the view range DPM and gun handling. And I run gun stabilizer to make it the best kind of pinpoint sniper I could, but in reality you could take this off very easily. It will still be very accurate, and you could invest in an advanced powertrain or traction system to boost up your engine power and your top speed and your traverse speeds and things like that. So that's up to you. That's something that you can play around with. But if you have that exact same setup, you'd be looking at a view range of 500 meters. Your turret traverse would have improved due to the gun handling skills to 45.1 degrees a second. Your aim time would now be 1.78 seconds, an accuracy of 0.25, and a fantastic DPM of 4,716, which means that I now reload in 5.09 seconds. And I also run as a consumable large med kit, large repair kit, and the third option I run the whole patch kit. However, you could use combat rations and just improve your DPM as much as possible, or you can use a smoke screen if you find yourself getting caught out in the open to try and keep yourself hidden just that little bit. So that's it for talking about the stats of the FV214 Conqueror Mark 1. We're going to head on over to the garage, have a quick look at his armour, then we're going to get stuck into the gameplay. So we are now in the garage having a look at the armour profile of the Conqueror Mark 1. There isn't too much to talk about in terms of the armour of this tank. There are a couple of things I want you to know, but just know that it's definitely not reliable armour. The turret armour isn't as good as the Conqueror's turret. In the World War II game mode, you can get penetrated straight through the front by a lot of different tanks, but there are a couple of ways you can try to deflect shells, and you might get lucky and stay in the battle for that little bit longer. So the thickest part of the armour is here on the mantlet, 254mm of armour, and you know, in Era 2 standards, that's not very thick at all. Of course, you've got this sloping back on the mantlet, the gun itself protecting it, so that will be a little bit of a harder shot. And then to the sides of the turret, you have armour ranging from sort of 205, 203mm, all in different sections up to 152mm. And what that means is on the sides of the turret, the armour is sloped back at such an angle that there are some auto ricochet angles, especially when you're using the full extent of the 10 degrees of gun depression. So when you're using your gun depression, move around as much as possible, side to side, forwards and backwards. Try and get them to hit the outer edges of your turret and bounce off of the most sort of sloped part of the turret. I hope that makes sense. Just try and make it a harder target. People will obviously go for this cupola as well on top, and it's a relatively easy shot to hit for the accuracy levels in Era 2 of the Cold War game mode. But you can always try and raise your gun and try and catch the shell with your gun and absorb it. But the best thing is just to move on a ridge line. In terms of your upper hull, that's 152mm. It is sloped back, so at an extreme angle, you're very lucky to bounce, but you might just do that. It's happened a few times to me when people are firing at you on the move or trying to track you. It's all about trying to keep moving as best as possible. You have more armour on the sides here that's sloped back, so from the side, obviously you will be an easy target on the side of the hull and the side of the turret. Rear of the turret is going to be a very easy place to penetrate indeed. However, this is the biggest sort of talking point I wanted to talk about in the Conqueror. You have 76mm of side armour, meaning you're very good at side scraping. You won't get overmatched by anything, unless I'm not sure about ATGMs, but there's no caliber in Era 2 that'll be able to overmatch this armour, so you're able to side scrape pretty well in this tank and bait people into shooting the sides of your tank. However, bear in mind your turret's probably still going to be visible and a relatively easy shot, and it's pretty big as well. You also have a terrible lower plate, so definitely can't rely on that. And that's pretty much all there is to know about the armour of this vehicle. You have ridiculously bad hull armour at the back. Back of the turret's a nice easy penetration. Your engine deck, when you're side scraping, you can watch out if people are above you. They'll be able to go through that with HE. But it's all about side scraping, using your hold down position, using the most you can use of that 10 degrees of gun depression, and sort of wiggling your turret in between shots and trying getting people to ricochet off the sides of your turret. But you are not a brawling kind of heavy tank. You are a supporting heavy tank that plays kind of like a medium tank with a little bit of armour. You have the ability to side scrape, and that's pretty much it for the Conqueror Mark 1. So that's it about the armour. We're now going to get stuck into the first of 3 gameplays. So we are now into the first of 3 gameplays in today's video in the Conqueror Mark 1, and we are here on Kaunas. It's a team destruction battle, so no stupid capture circles to end the battle within a few minutes. Hopefully it will last long enough that we are able to get a good amount of damage. We're going to head, using the pretty sluggish mobility at the start, to the corner of this rock in front of us and try and sort of shoot towards the north, shoot towards the tanks that like to situate themselves in D8, D9, that kind of area, and hopefully we're going to be able to support the light tanks that have pushed forward to get the vision. If you are too aggressive in the Conqueror Mark 1, I found out very early on, you will just get absolutely wrecked. If you are not hull down, then you're just going to get buttered every time, and even when you are hull down, you are still a pretty easy target for a lot of the tanks in Era 2, and you are a target for light tanks that like to use autocannons like the BMP2 or ATGMs, because you don't have much spaced armour apart from over the tracks, and it's going to be an easy, juicy penetration for them, so definitely watch out for that. So we're just situated here behind some of the medium and heavy tanks, trying to get some mid to long range fire in at the tanks that are crossing towards the northeast. And it's all about just putting your gun to work, using the distraction and the vision from your light tanks and your medium tanks and the heavy tanks that go forward, and sitting at a kind of mid-range distance and supporting them. And that's basically the role of the Conqueror. You don't want to expect too much from this tank. Forget what you know about it from the World War II game mode, because it's definitely not as good. It's not terrible. The DPM is really nice and the gun handling's brilliant. You just need to get yourself into positions to be able to dish out that damage. Make use of hard cover like I am here with the rock to my right. Make use of your team's vision. Try and create crossfires, and think about your positioning on the map. Think about when you need to fall back, when you need to push forward, because obviously it takes you a little bit longer to get there than other tanks. And also, if people like to YOLO and rush like they do, especially in the Cold War game mode in the light tanks, you want to be able to get into a position where you're able to fall back relatively quickly, and that's where that lovely reverse speed, or best in class in our comparison we did in the review and guide, the best in class reverse speed does help you get out of those sticky situations quite nicely. We're trying to side scrape here against this M60A1 Rise. I slightly over angle. This is the kind of angle you want to be going out with. Popping a shot in, snapping one in, and then going forward and only exposing a very well angled side, because your side armor's very nice indeed. You can see here that the view range that is slightly better than some of the other heavy tanks in Era 2 is paying dividends. We're getting a little bit of assistance and we're just getting the odd shot here and there. We are getting penetrated every time someone comes to damage us, and a BMP2 comes round and there's nothing you can really do. I tried to bait him into just shooting the track and maybe reducing the damage or absorbing the ATGM, but in all honesty there's not much you can do. Just got to suck it up, buttercup, take it, and then try and get your revenge in terms of putting your gun to work. So I know that he's fired another ATGM off. I'm going to pop round the corner and get another shell off, and you can definitely surprise people with this DPM. And the fact that your alpha damage is slightly lower, meaning your reload is slightly lower as well, means you can keep people perma-tracked in positions. And you're going to see that in later gameplay where you can just keep them tracked. They've lost their repair kit. Some people don't like to use, premium repair kits, premium med kits. They can't afford it, or they prefer to use a different consumable. And sometimes you're able to keep them in place, so that's definitely something to think about. I probably could be switching here to Hesh rounds to deal with this Stingray and this Leopard 1A1, but I loaded the premium, I believe, for this Rise at longer distances, because the penetration can suffer when tanks have a lot of space composite armor all over the front of them. But we played our supporting role there pretty well there. We have a little bit of an impact, I believe, in that battle. We finished in second place with a small profit, first class mastery, 1.3k basic speed, 2 kills, 5.1k direct damage, and 1000 assistance. So now we're going to head on into the second game and talk about what is going on there. Righty ho, we're now into the second gameplay in today's video in the Conqueror Mark 1. And we are here on Vineyards. We've spawned on the western side, and I'm not going to go too far from the base for the beginning portions of this battle. I'm going to go to these ridgelines right in front of me. I'm going to knock down this tree intentionally to use as physical concealment, but also to try and retain a little bit of concealment when I'm firing through the vision mechanics in the game. And I'm going to use this ridgeline and the 10 degrees of gun depression to try and get mid-range to long-range supporting fire at the enemies that my light tanks are spotting up. They've gone forward. That's good of them. They're spotting, which, you usually don't have teams that do that, or sometimes you don't. So it's always nice to reward your light tanks or any kind of tank that's gone forward and being your vision. You just don't want to push forward too much in this tank, especially early on before you get a sort of grips of where the battle is going. You want to be patient. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. It might be a tough grind for players that like that fast-paced, like main battle tank kind of gameplay where they're rushing forward, ramming people, all that kind of good stuff. And of course that's fun. Light tanks are fun. This is a decent tank. It's not horrific. It's underpowered compared to things like the FV214, but it's got more than enough firepower to make it work, and the grind is relatively short to get to the Chieftain Mark 5, and I'll have to do a review and play session when I get that and see how that holds up to the other Era 2 heavy tanks as well. But we're using this ridgeline here to our advantage. I'm trying to fire behind bushes where possible so that my shell tracers are harder to be seen, and I'm retaining the concealment through the bush. Of course I'm not spotted, but with the shell tracers and the true vision system in the Cold War game mode, it's likely that people are going to be scanning the horizon for where I am firing from. So I'm just rocking backwards and forwards in case people are firing at me, hoping that they're going to ricochet off my turret, and I'm just trying to put round after round at distance at these enemies that are being spotted. And it might not be glamorous gameplay or heroic yet anyway. We're just putting our gun to use. We've got the excellent sniping capacity, and at this distance our armor is going to be much more effective than if we were up close and brawling. And of course you can do that if it's really necessary, or you're against players where you feel really confident that you're going to be able to outplay them, but it's always a good idea to get a good lay of the land in a tank like this. And because you are relatively slow getting to where you need to be, it's sometimes good to sit back, defend the base. A lot of our team have pushed forward. There's a few of us hanging around here. I'm not sure if all of us are doing, good work with their guns, but I'm just trying to get as much out as possible. Then I can always reevaluate my positioning a little bit later on. We keep getting spotted somehow whenever I poke up on this ridgeline, and it's only until now then I realise that there is a tank destroyer behind us, and I believe it's an M50 Ontos, and of course that sneaky little bugger would be behind us. Our medium tank here has gone in to take him out, and I'm going to try and scan the horizon with the True Vision system. He's gone over, and our T-55 Enigma is going to go and probably take him out, but we're going to go and back him up just in case the M50 Ontos is reloaded. He was lighting me up, bit of a nuisance, so it's always good to check your surroundings, clear your area around you so you can fire without being spotted. And now I'm just going to see if I can get some more fire on these ridgelines, and it really is kind of hard work, honest work. It's not the glamorous work that you're going to be doing in some other tanks, but if you want to have good games in it, more often than not, you're going to have to be a little bit more reserved. You could be slightly more aggressive than I am being now, but I have a pretty good feeling we are going to lose the south of the map. And by the time I push over, I have a feeling that we are probably going to be outnumbered. So I'm staying here to defend the base. There's a lot of open ground between me and the enemies, meaning if I stay here, I can use this ridgeline, and when they're advancing, I can put round after round into them, trying to help out the tanks that are in the middle of the tank, try and take out this Chieftain Mark 5, which is the tank we'll be getting after this one. We do, and we've picked up 3k damage in 5 minutes, which isn't fantastic for a tank with as good DPM, but we've also got a couple of kills, and it's all about making these little bits of impact with a support tank. Not expecting too much, not going in expecting to bounce everything off of your turret like you may in the Tier 9 Conqueror in the World War II game mode. We are just trying to be patient, and I'm just going to have to wait for these tanks to push through the south and then hopefully get some shots on them and get some vision on them as they cross. We are getting pinged, or it might just be me, but it looks like me and the 3 tanks with me are being pinged. I don't usually spend a whole game, as you've seen on my channel before, around the base, but I just felt like it was necessary for the moment. I always felt like it was necessary for me to be near the base to defend, because I felt like we're going to lose the south, and yeah, the mobility isn't good enough to go there, get a few rounds and pull back. It's one of those things you've got to think really hard with this tank about where you want to go, what position and what flank you want to push at the start of the battle. So take a bit of a look at the team selection, how many platoons are there, what kind of map are you on, and that kind of thing. So we've just come in round a little bit more towards the north, trying to get some crossfire on these tanks that are in the centre. We have lots of foliage here to hide our tank, and we got nice ridgelines we can fall back behind. We've got that lovely 21, I think, kilometres an hour in reverse, or 22 kilometres an hour in reverse now, and that's going to mean that we can pull back off of these ridgelines nice and quickly and try and avoid fire. The south has fallen. It might not have done if I had made my way over there, but I might well have just got stuck and the game might have been a complete loss. So we pulled back. Now we're going to go forwards and defend the capture circle. I've got to be careful about being caught in a crossfire with the tanks to my left, but you can see here with the premium penetration, now we only have premium rounds left, the premium APDS. We should be able to go through this T-72 no problem. It's a very close game, so I'm very wary of taking damage. I'm being a bit lazy with these shots. I should just pull forward more and go down into the hole. I know I can go through the turret, but it would have been a safer bet just to shoot down on the hole, like I did there, and take that T-72 out of the game. And now I'm just going to roll forwards a little bit, use the hard cover in front of me to advance, and try and advance from ridgeline to ridgeline. This is the bit that's dangerous in the Conqueror Mark 1, but the tanks are distracted now. There is a tank destroyer in front of me and a heavy tank that I'm going to go forward and try and help. I'm going to use the command wheel to let the fellow heavy tank there. I'm going all in on this FV214. We get a nice shot into the side. I was going for the happy little ram into the side. Unfortunately, I don't get enough momentum, but we do manage to reload very quickly with this beautiful DPM, and we manage to take him out. And now we can restore some of our hit points, which we have preserved for the end of the battle, and try and get some damage at the end of the game. Getting some nice damage on the BMP-1. Gun handling is really, really nice. Shell velocity feels so good. We've damaged that BMP-1's engine, and as he comes back round again, we should be able to finish him off. And now it's just a platoon of heavy tanks. I'm not sure if they are in the same platoon because my eyesight's terrible, but I'm just going to be a little bit careful, allow my teammates to the left and behind me to come up. He gets shot. I believe that was the FV214 firing. We get a quick snapshot off, and now we should be able to go straight through the upper hull with these premium APDS rounds. And now it's 3-on-1, and we've bided our time, played that support role, and now we can reap the benefits of having a relatively good game. Go in, he turns side on, nice easy penetration, and a ram to finish that game, where we pick up 7.4k direct damage, MVP on our team, 8 kills, and a nice profit of 500,000 silver with this weird silver bug that's going on at the moment. But that's it for this second game. We're now going to head on into the third and final game. So we are now into the third and final gameplay of today's video. We are here on Vineyards again, but this time it's an assault battle, and we are defending an assault, and we have spawned in the south to southwest corner of the map. I was thinking about going to the castle in front of me, trying to side scrape off the hard cover and getting shots at tanks towards the centre and the north of the map, and also down the 9 and 0 line. However, our armadillo decides to just kill himself at the start of the battle. Maybe dinner was ready, but we're going to go forwards now and see if we can get a bit of vision for ourselves. And this is playing the Conqueror slightly more aggressively, but still being a little bit passive when needed to try and keep our tank in the game. So we're just advancing through the J line, going to the ridge lines in front of us. It's a little bit of an awkward trek with pretty poor mobility that the Conqueror has. We could get caught out in the side. If tanks rush down this ridge, we might be unprotected from the tanks behind us, but once we get to this ridge line and poke up, we should get some nice vision off, and we should get some nice assistance as well from the tanks that are all situated towards our base. It's always a good idea in assault, even though you're defending, to go and spot people that are trying to attack you so you don't get pincered into your base. However, don't rush off, completely lose your teammates in the base and get yourself taken out of the battle, because at the end of the day, the point of the game is to defend the base when you are in an assault battle and you are defending. So we're going to come over and help our teammate out. I probably should have come over just that little bit quicker. We do manage to take out the M60A2 before our friend gets taken out, but unfortunately he gets taken out from behind subsequently, so sorry about that, but try my best and hopefully we can avenge your death. We can go straight through the front of this Maguk 6B gal with this nice penetration. I'm going to wait till he turns completely side on, get another shot into him, and you can see how quickly the DPM, or the damage, racks up with this DPM, I should say. It doesn't take too long to have a pretty decent game. A bit of a lazy auto-aim there. I would have gone for his tracks if I had aimed it, but I was very, very lucky to hit him and track him. And this is what I mean about keeping people in place with your DPM and rate of fire in the Conqueror Mark 1. We managed to keep him completely pinned. We get a kill, we get damage, and we get assistance. And you can see that we've blocked 920 damage from that Maguk 6B gal before, showing you that it's a little bit of an all-rounder, a sort of support tank with a little bit of armour. It can be frustrating to play because of the mobility, but all in all I don't think it's a bad tank. It's just not one of the best, and it's probably a tank that people will forget about once they go up this line and go towards the Challenger 1, Challenger 2, that kind of thing. So we're going to fall back a little bit. We felt a little bit vulnerable there, and I say we, I mean me and my crew, of course, in the Conqueror Mark 1. going to come underneath and try and go to this central location. There are some nice little alcoves you can sit in and try and get a vision out. I'm hoping to get side shots into tanks that have pushed down the 1-2 line into our capture circle, but I'm also trying to keep vision up on the tanks that are going to be trying to come in from the eastern side of the map. We're getting some nice spotting assistance on this M60A2, a very dangerous tank indeed. He gets taken out, and we're going to see if we can get some shells into this Sheridan or any of these tanks that have been highlighted trying to take our base. We get a nice shell there into that M113, however we do take a shot into the side and rear of the turret there, reducing our hit points, so we're going to boost our hit points back up with the whole patch kit. Use the hard cover, keep rocking backwards and forwards just in case anyone's aiming at me and it might put off their aim. And we're going to try and pop up when necessary and get vision out on tanks that are towards the centre and towards the eastern side of the map. Got myself into a little bit of a sticky situation here with the FV214. I decide just to go straight for the premium APCR to make sure I penetrate. Face hug the FV214. I'm going to raise my gun in front of his gun, but he came over to me and was ammo wrecked, or his loader was damaged. I'm not sure if he intentionally YOLO'd when his ammo rack was damaged, or whether he was damaged when he came over to take me out. However, I was very thankful because we managed to take him out with our good rate of fire. And now you're seeing what an idiot would do, and that is auto aim. And it should have gone through in reality, this T72 AV, but it was slightly angled, and due to the APDS nature, it's not going to normalise very well, and it's going to just ricochet off the side of his armour. We put a good few rounds into him, but the few that we missed really do hold us back there in this battle, and it's going to take a while for this one to end, so I'm going to skip forward and we're going to see how we did and whether our team managed to take this one down. Unfortunately, our team don't manage to take that one down, but we still had a respectable damage game in the Conqueror Mark 1. We finished top of our team with 4 kills, 7.3k direct damage, 1.5k assistance. And yeah, that's a version of the Conqueror Mark 1 being slightly more aggressive, but you're still going to be as passive as possible. Support your heavy tanks, and it's not too bad of a grind. It's not a bad tank, just don't expect too much and you should have a nice grind and a good time. But that's all I have to say on the FV214 Conqueror Mark 1. Thank you all so much for your support, and until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.